The news of Jake's atmospheric weapon demonstration spread throughout Zephyrian space faster than their military commanders could contain it. Civilian populations on dozens of Zephyrian worlds began demanding that their government negotiate peace with the humans rather than risk the destruction of their homeworld's atmosphere. High Commander Vextar found himself facing the collapse of his military authority, as ship captains throughout the Zephyrian fleet refused to continue attacks against human colonies. The demonstration at Kepler Station had proven that humans possessed the ultimate weapon against Zephyrian civilization, and no military victory was worth risking the loss of their ability to breathe. We have received a formal request for peace. Negotiations from the Zephyrian Imperial Council, Amy told Jake while reading the diplomatic message that had arrived through neutral channels. They want to meet at the trading station on the border between our territories to discuss terms for ending hostilities. Jake looked out through the observation windows of Kepler Station at the debris field, where enemy ships had fled after witnessing his atmospheric weapon demonstration. The sight filled him with grim satisfaction, because the Zephyrians were finally learning that actions had consequences. I will represent humanity at those peace negotiations, Jake announced to the surprise of everyone on the station. The Zephyrians need to understand that the person they tried to assassinate is now the one who controls their fate. Amy looked worried about Jake's plan to personally conduct the negotiations. The diplomatic corps will not approve of having an engineer represent humanity in such important peace talks. These negotiations require experienced diplomats who understand interstellar law and treaty protocols. The atmospheric weapon technology exists only in my mind and in these secure data drives, Jake replied while holding up the storage devices that contained all his research. If the Zephyrians want to ensure their homeworld's atmosphere remains safe, they will have to negotiate directly with the person who has the power to destroy it. Captain Ben Cooper agreed with Jake's assessment of the situation. The Zephyrians respect strength and fear nothing more than threats to their survival. Jake has both the scientific knowledge and the moral authority to demand justice for what they did to our research team. The peace negotiations took place aboard Neutral Station 7, which was located exactly halfway between human and Zephyrian territory. Jake arrived with a small delegation that included Amy Chen and Captain Cooper, along with recording equipment that could document every moment of the historic meeting. High Commander Vextar led the Zephyrian delegation, and he looked older and more tired than Jake had expected. The alien commander's eyes showed the strain of dealing with a military crisis that threatened the very existence of his civilization. Human engineer Jake Harrison, Vextar said in careful English when the negotiations began. I must admit that your atmospheric weapons have exceeded our worst predictions about human technological capabilities. Jake sat across from the alien commander at the negotiating table and felt the weight of representing his entire species in these crucial peace talks. High Commander Vextar, you ordered the assassination of my research team and used our peaceful, scientific mission as justification for attacking innocent human colonies. Now you will face the consequences of those decisions. The Zephyrian commander shifted uncomfortably in his chair before responding. Our intelligence services believed your research mission was gathering military data about our homeworld's atmospheric defenses. We acted to protect our civilization from what appeared to be a human spy operation. We were conducting legitimate, atmospheric research under a diplomatic agreement approved by both our governments. Jake replied with anger in his voice. Dr. Lisa Martinez and Captain Ben Cooper died because you chose to see threats where none existed. Amy presented detailed records of the original research mission, including all the diplomatic authorizations and scientific protocols that had been followed exactly. The evidence clearly showed that the human team had been conducting peaceful research rather than intelligence gathering for military purposes. Your paranoia and aggression caused this war, Jake continued while staring directly at the alien commander. Now you will accept responsibility for the damage you have caused and agree to terms that ensure this never happens again. Jake's peace terms were harsh but fair considering the circumstances. The Zephyrian Empire would withdraw immediately from all human territory and pay reparations for the colonies they had attacked. They would also provide full cooperation with ongoing investigations into the assassination of the Aurora research team. Most importantly, the Zephyrians would agree to a permanent non-aggression pact that included provisions for joint scientific research and cultural exchange. Any future violations of this agreement would result in the immediate deployment of atmospheric weapons against Zephyrian worlds. These terms are acceptable, High Commander Vextar said after consulting with his delegation. However, we must have assurance that your atmospheric weapons will not be used against our civilian populations if we comply with this peace agreement. Jake considered the commander's request carefully before responding. The atmospheric processors will remain operational and hidden throughout Zephyrian space as a guarantee of your good behavior. As long as you honor this peace agreement, your worlds will remain safe from atmospheric weapons. Amy looked surprised by Jake's decision to maintain the atmospheric weapon network rather than dismantling it after the peace agreement was signed. Jake, are you certain about keeping those processors active? The existence of such weapons could destabilize the entire galactic balance of power. The Zephyrians understand strength, and they will honor this peace agreement only as long as they believe we have the power to enforce it, Jake explained. If we remove the atmospheric weapons, they might decide to attack human colonies again in the future. The peace treaty was signed by both sides and transmitted to their respective governments for ratification. Within days, the Zephyrian fleet began withdrawing from human territory, while their government announced the end of hostilities and the beginning of a new era of cooperation between the two species. Jake found himself famous throughout human space as the engineer who had ended a war by threatening to recreate and destroy an entire world's atmosphere. The story of his survival and revenge captured the imagination of humans everywhere and made him a symbol of scientific ingenuity, triumphing over military aggression. What will you do now that the war is over? Captain Cooper asked while they prepared to leave Neutral Station 7. The military is offering you any position you want in their Research and Development Division. Jake looked at the peace treaty documents and thought about Lisa Martinez, who had died believing in the peaceful applications of atmospheric science. I'm going to build a research facility on the border between human and Zephyrian space where we can work together to develop terraforming technology for peaceful purposes. Amy agreed to join Jake at his new research facility, along with Captain Cooper, who would serve as head of security. The facility would employ both human and Zephyrian scientists working together to advance atmospheric engineering for the benefit of all species in the galaxy. The atmospheric processors will remain hidden and operational as a reminder of what happens when peaceful scientists are attacked, Jake announced during his first joint research meeting with Zephyrian colleagues. But our primary focus will be on using atmospheric science to create new worlds, rather than destroy existing ones. The research facility became a symbol of cooperation between former enemies and attracted scientists from dozens of species who wanted to learn advanced atmospheric engineering techniques. Jake's reputation as both a brilliant scientist and a dangerous enemy earned him respect from allies and former enemies alike. Late at night, Jake would stand on the observation deck of his facility and watch ships from human and Zephyrian space dock peacefully at his station. The sight filled him with satisfaction because he had turned his knowledge of atmospheric destruction into a force for creating cooperation and understanding between different species. The atmospheric weapons remained hidden throughout Zephyrian space as a constant but invisible reminder that some lines should never be crossed. Jake had proven that the most dangerous humans were not the warriors who fought with guns and ships, but the scientists who understood how to create and destroy the very foundations of life itself. Sometimes late at night, Jake would review the atmospheric data that Lisa Martinez had died to help collect, and he would remember her excitement about the peaceful applications of their research. Her dream of using atmospheric science to benefit all species had become reality, even though she had not lived to see it accomplished. The Zephyrian Empire honored their peace agreement and became valuable partners in developing new terraforming technologies. High Commander Vextar eventually visited Jake's research facility and personally apologized for the attack on the Aurora that had killed innocent scientists. You have taught us that knowledge can be more powerful than weapons, Vextar told Jake during a formal ceremony dedicating a memorial to Dr. Lisa Martinez and the other researchers who had died in the attack. The dead world Jake and Amy chose for testing their atmospheric weapon was called Baron 7, and it orbited a dying red star on the edge of human space. The planet had no atmosphere and no life, but it was the perfect size for demonstrating what their modified terraforming equipment could do to a world like Zephyros Prime. Amy's team spent 6 weeks building 3 prototype atmospheric processors that were disguised to look like standard terraforming equipment. Each processor was the size of a small building and contained enough power to transform a planet's entire atmospheric composition within a matter of hours. Jake worked alongside the engineering team, installing the exotic particle generators that would recreate the unique atmospheric conditions found on Zephyros Prime. The technology was based on his atmospheric research, but modified to work as a weapon rather than a tool for creating livable worlds. "Are you certain this will work?" Amy asked while running final diagnostics on the prototype equipment. "We will only get one chance to demonstrate this weapon before the Zephyrians realize what we are capable of doing." Jake nodded confidently, while checking the atmospheric composition readings on his instruments. "The mathematical models are perfect, and we have tested every component individually. When we activate these processors, Baron 7 will have an atmosphere identical to Zephyros Prime within 6 hours." The test began at dawn, when Jake activated the first atmospheric processor from the safety of their orbital command ship. Below them on the planet's surface, the massive machine began generating exotic particles and releasing them into the thin atmosphere that already existed around Baron 7. Within the first hour, atmospheric pressure began rising as the processors created the complex gas mixtures that existed in the upper atmosphere of Zephyros Prime. Jake watched his instruments with fascination as chemistry that should have been impossible began taking place on the dead world below them. "Incredible," Amy whispered while monitoring the biological simulation systems. "The atmospheric composition is matching Zephyros Prime exactly, and the exotic particle interactions are maintaining perfect stability." By the 4th hour, Baron 7 had developed weather patterns and cloud formations that looked identical to those on the Zephyrian homeworld. The dead planet now had a breathable atmosphere that could support Zephyrian life, and the transformation had happened in less time than a normal working day. "Now comes the real test," Jake said while activating the secondary systems that would introduce toxic compounds into the newly created atmosphere. "We need to prove that we can destroy what we have created just as quickly as we built it." The atmospheric poisoning process began with the release of chemical compounds that would react with Zephyrian biology to cause immediate respiratory failure. Jake had designed the toxins based on Lisa Martinez's biological research, and they were specifically targeted to affect Zephyrian physiology while remaining harmless to human biology. Within 2 hours, the atmosphere of Baron 7 had become completely toxic to Zephyrian life, while remaining perfectly breathable for humans. The demonstration was complete and proved that Jake's atmospheric weapons could recreate and then destroy any planet's breathing air with terrifying efficiency. "This is the most powerful weapon ever created," Amy said while reviewing the test results. "We have just proven that we can threaten the homeworld of any alien species by recreating and then poisoning their planetary atmosphere." Jake felt a mixture of pride and horror at what they had accomplished. The same terraforming knowledge that he had used to create new worlds for human colonization had been turned into a weapon that could destroy entire civilizations by taking away their ability to breathe. "Now we send a message to High Commander Vexitar and show him exactly what will happen to Zephyros Prime if his attacks on human colonies continue," Jake said, while preparing a recording of their atmospheric weapon demonstration. The message Jake recorded was simple and direct. He identified himself as the surviving engineer from the Aurora research mission and explained that he now possessed the complete atmospheric data for Zephyros Prime. The recording showed the transformation of Baron 7 from a dead world into a perfect copy of the Zephyrian homeworld atmosphere, followed by the systematic poisoning that made it toxic to Zephyrian life. "High Commander Vextar, you ordered the assassination of my research team, and now you are using our peaceful scientific mission as justification for attacking innocent human colonies," Jake said while looking directly into the recording camera. "I survived your attack, and I now have the power to recreate your homeworld's atmosphere on any planet in the galaxy, and then destroy it completely." Jake gave the Zephyrian commander 48 hours to withdraw all military forces from human territory and agree to peace negotiations. If the attacks continued, Jake promised to deploy atmospheric weapons throughout Zephyrian space and begin the systematic destruction of every world where Zephyrians lived. The message was transmitted directly to Zephyrian Imperial Command and, within 6 hours, High Commander Vextar responded with rage and disbelief. Human engineer, your threats are meaningless and your atmospheric weapons are impossible according to our scientific analysis. The Zephyrian Empire will not be intimidated by desperate lies from a defeated enemy. Jake had expected this response and was already prepared for the next phase of his demonstration. Amy, we need to show them that our atmospheric weapons are real and that we have already deployed them throughout their territory. Amy looked worried about Jake's plan to escalate their demonstration. If we deploy atmospheric processors in Zephyrian space, they will send their entire fleet to destroy us before we can activate the weapons. That is exactly what I am counting on, Jake replied, while reviewing star charts of the Zephyrian border regions. When their fleet comes to destroy us, we will activate the atmospheric processors in the space around their ships and show them what it feels like to watch their home atmosphere being created and destroyed before their eyes. Jake and Amy spent 3 days secretly deploying atmospheric processors throughout the asteroid field near Kepler Station. The processors were hidden inside modified mining equipment and programmed to activate simultaneously when Jake transmitted the proper command codes. High Commander Vextar responded to Jake's demonstration exactly as predicted by sending a powerful fleet of 20 warships to destroy Kepler Station and eliminate the human atmospheric weapon threat. The Zephyrian ships approached the station in a standard attack formation, while demanding the surrender of all atmospheric research data. Human engineer, your atmospheric weapons are a bluff, and we have come to prove that your threats are empty lies. Vextar announced over the communication channels, surrender your research data, and we will grant you a quick death instead of the slow torture you deserve. Jake waited until the Zephyrian fleet was completely surrounded by the hidden atmospheric processors before activating his devastating demonstration. Within minutes, the space around the enemy ships began filling with the exotic particles that created Zephyros Prime's unique atmospheric composition. The Zephyrian crews watched in horror as their sacred home atmosphere materialized in the void of space around their warships. Many of the alien soldiers began crying when they saw the familiar gas mixtures and weather patterns of their beloved home world being recreated in front of their eyes. This is impossible, High Commander Vextar transmitted with shock and fear in his voice. How are you creating our home atmosphere in the vacuum of space? The same way I can destroy it, Jake replied while activating the atmospheric poisoning systems. Watch carefully as I show you what will happen to Zephyros Prime if your attacks on human colonies continue. The atmospheric poisoning process began immediately, and the Zephyrian crews were forced to watch as their sacred home atmosphere became toxic and deadly within a matter of hours. Several enemy ships broke formation and fled back towards Zephyrian space, while transmitting desperate reports about the human atmospheric weapons. Other ships in the fleet attempted to surrender rather than continue fighting against an enemy who could threaten their entire civilization by controlling the very air they breathed. High Commander Vextar found himself facing a mutiny, as his own crews refused to risk the destruction of their homeworld's atmosphere. To Jake's complete surprise, one of the surrendering Zephyrian ships contained Captain Ben Cooper, who had been captured alive when the Aurora was destroyed. Ben looked older and thinner than Jake remembered, but his eyes still carried the same determination that had made him such an effective Marine officer. I knew you would find a way to turn the tables on these bastards, Ben said when they were reunited aboard Kepler Station. Lisa would be proud of what you have accomplished with her atmospheric research. Jake felt tears in his eyes at the mention of Lisa Martinez and the knowledge that her death had not been in vain. The Zephyrians are going to learn that attacking human scientists carries a price they cannot afford to pay, he said while watching enemy ships flee toward their home territory. Jake's escape pod crashed into the docking bay of Kepler Station with enough force to crack the pod's hull and leave him unconscious for 6 hours. When he finally woke up, he was lying in a medical bed with bandages covering burns on his arms and a splitting headache that made thinking difficult. Dr. Paul Grant was the station's chief medical officer, and he looked worried as he checked Jake's vital signs. You are lucky to be alive, he said while examining the scanner readings. That escape pod was barely holding together when our salvage crew found you drifting in space. Jake tried to sit up, but pain shot through his ribs and forced him back, down onto the medical bed. What happened to the Aurora, he asked, even though he already knew the terrible answer. Did Captain Cooper and Dr. Martinez survive the attack? Dr. Grant's expression became sad and he shook his head slowly. We picked up the debris field from your ship on long-range sensors, but found no other escape pods or survivors. I am sorry, but you appear to be the only one who made it out alive. The full weight of losing his friends hit Jake like a physical blow, and he felt sick to his stomach. Lisa Martinez had been working with him for 3 years and had become like a sister to him. Ben Cooper had saved their lives many times during dangerous missions and died trying to protect them one final time. Jake closed his eyes and tried to push away the images of the Aurora exploding, while his friends were still aboard. The guilt of surviving when they did not made him want to crawl into a dark corner and never come out again. There is something else you need to know, Dr. Grant said in a gentle voice. News reports are saying that the Zephyrian Empire has declared war on humanity, and they are claiming your research mission was actually a spy operation designed to gather military intelligence. Jake opened his eyes and stared at the doctor with shock and anger. That is completely false, he said, while struggling to sit up despite the pain. We were conducting legitimate atmospheric research under a diplomatic agreement approved by both governments. Dr. Grant helped Jake sit up and handed him a data pad, showing news reports from across human space. The headlines were terrible and showed images of Zephyrian warships attacking human colonies, while claiming they were defending themselves against human aggression. The Zephyrians are using your research mission as justification for military action, Dr. Grant explained. They claim you were gathering intelligence about their homeworld's defenses and atmospheric vulnerabilities for a future human invasion. Jake felt cold rage building in his chest as he read the news reports. The Zephyrians had murdered his friends and destroyed their research ship, and now they were using that attack as an excuse to start a war against innocent human colonies. How many colonies have they attacked? Jake asked while scrolling through the increasingly bad news reports. 3 so far, with thousands of civilian casualties, Dr. Grant replied. The human fleet is mobilizing for war, but our ships are scattered across the galaxy, and it will take months to mount an effective defense. Jake looked down at his personal belongings that had been salvaged from the escape pod and saw that his secure data drives were still intact. Inside those drives was complete atmospheric data for Zephyros Prime, including detailed information about the exotic particles that kept their atmosphere stable under triple-star radiation. An idea began forming in Jake's mind that was so terrible and brilliant at the same time that it made his hands shake with excitement and fear. If he understood the Zephyrian atmospheric system well enough to study it, then he also understood it well enough to destroy it. I need to contact Dr. Amy Chen at the military research facility on Earth, Jake told Dr. Grant. Tell her that Jake Harrison survived the Zephyrian attack and has critical information about enemy capabilities. Dr. Grant looked confused, but agreed to send the message. Amy Chen had been Jake's closest friend at the Terraforming Academy, and now worked on classified military projects developing advanced atmospheric modification technology. While waiting for Amy's reply, Jake began reviewing all the atmospheric data they had collected at Zephyros Prime. The complex interaction between exotic particles in the upper atmosphere was what allowed the planet to maintain stable breathing conditions under triple-star radiation. If those particles were altered or destroyed, the entire atmospheric system would collapse within hours. Amy's reply came through the communication system 3 hours later, and her voice was filled with relief and worry. Jake, thank goodness you are alive, she said through the static of long-range transmission. The news report said there were no survivors from the Aurora. Amy, I need your help with something that could end this war before it really begins, Jake said while looking at the atmospheric data on his screens. The Zephyrians think they can attack human colonies without consequences, but I have information that could change their minds very quickly. Amy's voice became serious and professional. What kind of information are you talking about, Jake? The military is looking for any advantage they can find against Zephyrian technology. Jake took a deep breath before explaining his terrible idea. I have complete atmospheric composition data for Zephyros Prime, including the exotic particle interactions that keep their planet livable. With the right equipment, we could recreate their atmospheric conditions on any world, and then introduce compounds that would make it toxic to Zephyrian biology. There was a long silence on the communication channel before Amy responded. You are talking about atmospheric warfare, Jake. Creating and then poisoning an entire planet's breathing air as a weapon. They killed Lisa and Ben, and now they are using our research mission as an excuse to attack innocent human colonies, Jake said with anger, making his voice shake. If we can threaten their homeworld's atmosphere, they will have to stop their attacks and negotiate for peace. Amy was quiet for several minutes while she considered the implications of what Jake was proposing. This would be the most dangerous weapon ever created, she finally said. The ability to recreate and then destroy any planet's atmospheric system could change the balance of power throughout the entire galaxy. That is exactly why it might work, Jake replied. The Zephyrians respect strength and fear nothing more than threats to their homeworld. If we can demonstrate that we have the power to destroy their atmosphere, they will have to listen to our demands for peace. Amy agreed to meet with Jake at Kepler Station to review the atmospheric data and discuss the technical requirements for building such a weapon. This project will require resources and equipment that can only be obtained through military channels, she warned. We will need official approval from Earth Command before proceeding. Jake spent the next week recovering from his injuries while studying every detail of the Zephyrian atmospheric data. The more he learned about their system, the more confident he became that it could be recreated and then systematically destroyed using modified terraforming equipment. Amy arrived at Kepler Station aboard a military transport ship carrying advanced atmospheric analysis equipment and a team of engineers who specialized in weaponizing terraforming technology. She looked older than Jake remembered, and her eyes carried the stress of working on classified military projects. Show me what you have discovered, Amy said while setting up her equipment in the station's laboratory. If we are going to build atmospheric weapons, we need to understand exactly how Zephyrian biology interacts with their planetary environment. Jake spent 3 days walking Amy through all the atmospheric data they had collected, including Lisa Martinez's biological research about Zephyrian plant and animal life. The combination of atmospheric chemistry and biological adaptation data gave them everything they needed to design targeted atmospheric weapons. This is incredible work, Amy said while reviewing the computer models Jake had created. The atmospheric engineering principles you have discovered here are decades ahead of anything we have developed in human space. Jake nodded grimly at her. Assessment. Lisa died to help gather this information, and now we are going to use it to threaten the people who killed her. There is a certain justice in that arrangement. Amy began designing prototype atmospheric processors that could recreate Zephyros Prime's unique atmospheric conditions, and then introduce chemical compounds that would make the air toxic to Zephyrian physiology. We will need to test these prototypes on a dead world before we can threaten to use them against populated planets, she explained. How long will it take to build and test working prototypes? Jake asked while helping her with the technical calculations. 6 weeks to build the equipment and another 2 weeks to conduct field tests, Amy replied. If the tests are successful, we will have the most powerful deterrent weapon in galactic history. Jake looked out through the laboratory windows at the stars beyond Kepler Station and thought about Lisa Martinez and Ben Cooper, who had died believing they were conducting peaceful scientific research. Soon their deaths would be avenged, and the Zephyrian Empire would learn that attacking human scientists carried a terrible price. The Zephyrians want to use fear as a weapon against human colonies, Jake said quietly. Let us show them what real fear looks like when someone threatens to take away the very air they breathe. The journey to Zephyros Prime took exactly 3 months, and Jake spent most of that time studying the preliminary atmospheric data they had received from the Galactic Council. The numbers were unlike anything he had seen before, and the more he learned about the triple star system, the more fascinated he became with its impossible physics. Dr. Lisa Martinez worked alongside him in the ship's laboratory, analyzing theoretical models of how Zephyrian biology might have adapted to such a complex atmospheric environment. Captain Ben Cooper maintained the ship's defensive systems and stayed in regular contact with both human and Zephyrian fleet commands to ensure their safe passage through dangerous space. As they approached the Zephyrian home system, Jake could see the 3 stars through the observation windows, and they were beautiful in a way that made his chest feel tight with wonder. The largest star burned bright yellow like Earth's sun, while the second star glowed deep red like a dying ember. The third star was smaller and burned with brilliant blue-white light that made the other 2 stars look dim by comparison. The radiation patterns from those 3 stars should make life impossible on any planet in this system, Dr. Martinez said while reviewing her biological data. Yet the Zephyrians have built one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, right here under this stellar chaos. Jake nodded in agreement while studying the real-time atmospheric readings that were coming in from their long-range sensors. The preliminary data from the Council had been accurate, but seeing the actual numbers in real time was like watching magic happen. Gases that should react violently with each other were somehow maintaining perfect stability in the planet's upper atmosphere. Captain Cooper joined them at the observation windows and pointed toward a group of ships approaching from the direction of Zephyros Prime. "Those are our escort vessels coming to meet us. 4 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyer-class ships for a simple research mission seems like excessive protection." The Zephyrian ships were sleek and dangerous-looking with hull designs that suggested they were built for combat, rather than peaceful escort duties. Jake watched them approach and felt a small chill of worry about why such powerful warships were needed to protect a scientific mission. Communication came through from the lead Zephyrian ship, and the voice that spoke was harsh and unfriendly. "Human vessel Aurora, you will follow our ships to the designated research zone and remain in that area for the duration of your mission. Any deviation from approved flight paths will be considered a hostile act." Captain Cooper responded with professional courtesy, but Jake could see tension in his shoulders. "Acknowledged, Escort Command. We will comply with all flight restrictions and appreciate your protection during our research activities." The Aurora followed the Zephyrian ships toward their homeworld, and Jake got his first clear view of the planet that had captured his scientific imagination. Zephyros Prime was larger than Earth, and covered with swirling cloud patterns that changed color as the light from the 3 different stars hit them at various angles. The northern hemisphere glowed with golden light from the yellow star, while the southern regions were bathed in deep red illumination from the dying star. "Incredible," Dr. Martinez whispered, while taking readings from the biological scanners. "The atmospheric composition changes dramatically between the northern and southern hemispheres, but somehow life exists in both regions with completely different environmental conditions." Jake was already deep in calculations, trying to understand how the planet maintained atmospheric pressure across regions with such different stellar heating. The physics should have created massive windstorms that would tear the atmosphere apart within a few centuries. Instead, the planet showed signs of stable weather patterns that had existed for millions of years. The designated research zone was in high orbit above the planet's equator, where all 3 stars provided balanced illumination throughout the planet's rotation cycle. Jake immediately began deploying atmospheric analysis probes that would gather detailed data about gas compositions at different altitude levels. For the next several days, Jake worked 18 hours at a time processing data and building computer models of the Zephyrian atmospheric system. The results were beyond his wildest expectations and showed atmospheric engineering principles that could revolutionize human terraforming technology. Dr. Martinez focused on biological samples gathered by remote probes and discovered that Zephyrian plant life had developed unique photosynthesis processes that could use radiation from all 3 stars simultaneously. "Their entire ecosystem is based on atmospheric chemistry that we thought was impossible," she told Jake excitedly. Captain Cooper maintained communication with the escort ships and noticed that they seemed to be getting more aggressive with each passing day. The Zephyrian commanders were asking detailed questions about their research activities and demanding copies of all data being collected. "Something feels wrong about this situation," Captain Cooper told Jake privately during one of their evening briefings. "The escort ships are positioning themselves like they expect trouble rather than providing protection for friendly allies." Jake was too focused on his atmospheric research to pay much attention to Captain Cooper's security concerns. The data he was collecting represented the greatest scientific discovery of his career, and possibly the key to terraforming worlds that had been impossible to colonize before. On their final day in the research zone, Jake made a breakthrough discovery about how the Zephyrian atmosphere maintained stability under triple-star radiation. The secret was a complex interaction between exotic particles in the upper atmosphere that created a natural shield against harmful stellar radiation while allowing beneficial energy to reach the planet's surface. "This is it," Jake told Dr. Martinez while showing her the computer models. "This is how we can terraform worlds in multiple star systems and expand human colonization into previously unreachable areas of the galaxy." Jake immediately began downloading all their research data to secure storage drives that could survive almost any disaster. Years of working in dangerous environments had taught him to always have backup copies of important scientific discoveries. Dr. Martinez was equally excited about the biological implications of their research. The atmospheric engineering principles we have discovered here could allow us to create hybrid environments that support both human and alien life forms on the same world. As Jake finished securing the last of their data, Captain Cooper burst into the laboratory with alarm written across his face. "We need to evacuate immediately," he said while activating the ship's emergency systems. "The escort ships have powered up their weapons and are moving to attack positions." Jake looked through the observation windows and saw that the 4 Zephyrian cruisers had indeed moved to surround the Aurora in a classic combat formation. Their weapon systems were charging and their shields were at full power. "This makes no sense," Dr. Martinez said with confusion in her voice. "We are conducting authorized research under a diplomatic agreement approved by both governments." Captain Cooper was already preparing the ship's defensive systems and planning escape routes. "Diplomatic agreements mean nothing if someone has decided we are spies rather than scientists. We need to get out of this system immediately." The communication system crackled with an incoming message from the lead Zephyrian ship. "Human vessel Aurora, you have gathered intelligence on our homeworld under false diplomatic pretenses. By order of High Commander Vextar, you will surrender your research data and prepare to be boarded." Jake felt cold fear spreading through his chest as he realized their peaceful scientific mission had somehow become a military confrontation. "We cannot give them this data," he told Captain Cooper firmly. "This atmospheric research could save human lives on dozens of colony worlds." Captain Cooper nodded grimly and activated the ship's combat systems. "Then we fight our way out and hope we can reach human space before they destroy us." The first weapons blast from the Zephyrian ships hit the Aurora's shields and sent shock waves through the entire vessel. Jake grabbed his secure data drives and ran toward the escape pod bay, while Dr. Martinez gathered her biological samples. Captain Cooper fought back with everything the Aurora had, but the research vessel was no match for 4 military cruisers. The ship's shields failed within minutes, and hull breaches began venting atmosphere into space. "Get to the escape pods," Captain Cooper shouted over the sound of alarms and explosions. "I will try to buy you time to escape with the research data." Jake reached the escape pod bay just as another weapons blast tore through the Aurora's hull. Dr. Martinez was right behind him, but a falling beam caught her across the back and she fell to the deck with blood spreading around her body. "Lisa!" Jake shouted while trying to help her stand, but she pushed the biological samples into his hands instead. "Take the data and go," she whispered with pain in her voice. "Do not let them destroy what we have learned here." Jake grabbed both his atmospheric data and her biological research before climbing into the nearest escape pod. Through the small window, he could see Captain Cooper still fighting from the ship's bridge, while explosions lit up the Aurora's hull like deadly fireworks. Jake Harrison stood in front of the massive window of the Earth Space Command building and watched ships come and go from the orbital dock above. At 34 years old, he had already changed 7 dead worlds into places where humans could live and breathe. His hands were rough from years of working with atmospheric processors, and his eyes carried the tired look of someone who had spent too many nights staring at air composition charts. Today was different, though, because today he was getting the biggest job of his life. General Kate Murphy walked into the briefing room carrying a sealed folder that looked important. She was a small woman with gray hair, but everyone in the terraforming division knew she could make or break careers with a single decision. Jake turned away from the window and sat down at the long table, where two other people were already waiting. Dr. Lisa Martinez was a xenobiologist who specialized in alien life forms and atmospheric requirements. She had worked with Jake on 3 previous missions, and they made a good team. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the standard blue uniform of the science division. Next to her sat Captain Ben Cooper, a space marine with broad shoulders and scars on his hands from combat operations. His job was to keep scientists alive when they visited dangerous places. General Murphy opened the folder and spread out star charts on the table. The charts showed a system with 3 bright stars and several planets orbiting around them. One planet was marked with a red circle, and Jake could see it was labeled as Zephyros Prime. "Gentlemen and lady, we have a situation that requires our best team," General Murphy said in her serious voice. "The Galactic Council has approved a research mission to study the atmospheric composition of Zephyros Prime, which is the homeworld of the Zephyrian Empire. This is a diplomatic mission of the highest importance, and failure is not an option." Jake leaned forward to study the charts more carefully. Zephyros Prime was unlike any world he had ever seen before. The planet sat in the middle of a triple star system where 3 different colored suns provided heat and light. The atmospheric readings shown on the preliminary charts were incredible and showed layers of gases that should not be able to exist together under normal conditions. "Why do they want us to study their home world?" Captain Cooper asked with suspicion in his voice. "The Zephyrians have never been friendly to humans, and they guard their territory like it contains precious metals." General Murphy nodded at the captain's concern. "The Council believes that understanding Zephyrian atmospheric science could help us develop better terraforming techniques for worlds in similar star systems. The Zephyrians have agreed to allow this study as part of a new trade agreement, but they insist on providing escort ships for our protection." Dr. Martinez picked up one of the atmospheric reading charts, and her eyes went wide. "These gas compositions are impossible under normal physics. How do they maintain stable breathing conditions, with 3 different stellar radiation sources affecting their atmosphere every day?" Jake took the chart from her hands and studied the numbers carefully. His mind began working through the complex calculations needed to understand how such an atmosphere could exist. The 3 suns created overlapping radiation fields that should have torn apart most atmospheric molecules within a few thousand years. Yet Zephyros Prime had maintained a stable breathing environment for millions of years according to the geological data. "This is fascinating work," Jake said quietly, while his brain processed the implications. "If we can understand how they maintain atmospheric stability under triple-star radiation, we could terraform worlds that were previously impossible to colonize. The applications for human expansion would be enormous." General Murphy smiled for the first time during the briefing. "That is exactly why the Council chose you for this mission, Jake. Your ability to understand alien atmospheric systems is unmatched in the entire human space fleet. You will have 3 months to study their world from orbit and gather all the data we need." Captain Cooper crossed his arms and looked uncomfortable. "What about security concerns? The Zephyrians are known for their military strength, and they do not trust outsiders. Why would they suddenly allow humans to study their most important world?" "The escort ships they provide will ensure our safety," General Murphy replied, but Jake noticed she did not sound completely convinced. "This mission has been approved at the highest levels of both governments, and all diplomatic protocols will be followed exactly." Jake was already lost in thought about the scientific possibilities. He had spent years learning how to create atmospheres that could support human life, but the Zephyrian system offered something completely different. Instead of creating new atmospheres, he would be studying one of the most complex natural atmospheric systems ever discovered by science. Dr. Martinez began gathering up the charts and data files. "When do we leave for this mission?" she asked while organizing the paperwork into neat stacks. "The research vessel Aurora is being prepared now and will be ready for departure in 1 week," General Murphy answered. "Jake, you will be the mission commander for all scientific operations, while Captain Cooper will handle security and ship operations. Dr. Martinez will focus on biological aspects of the atmospheric system." Jake stood up from the table and walked back to the window. Above them in orbit, he could see the Aurora being loaded with equipment and supplies for the long journey ahead. The ship was designed specifically for research missions and carried the most advanced atmospheric analysis equipment that human science had developed. "There is one more thing you should know," General Murphy said in a serious tone. "The Zephyrian Empire has been expanding their territory aggressively in recent years, and some council members believe they may be preparing for future conflicts. This research mission could provide valuable intelligence about their capabilities if diplomatic relations deteriorate." Captain Cooper nodded grimly at this information. "So we are not just scientists on this mission, but also intelligence gatherers for potential military applications. Your primary mission is scientific research," General Murphy replied carefully. "Any intelligence value is secondary to the atmospheric data we need for terraforming development." Jake turned away from the window and looked at his team members. Dr. Martinez appeared excited about the scientific opportunities, while Captain Cooper seemed worried about the security implications. Jake felt both emotions at the same time, because this mission could advance human terraforming technology by decades, while also putting them in contact with a potentially hostile alien empire. "We will need to be very careful about how we conduct this research," Jake said thoughtfully. "The Zephyrians must not feel threatened by our presence or activities while we gather the data we need." 3 days later, Jake stood in his apartment packing equipment for the journey ahead. His personal, atmospheric analysis kit filled 2 large cases and contained instruments he had designed himself for measuring exotic gas compositions. The technical manuals for operating in triple star systems filled another case along with his personal research notes from previous terraforming projects. The apartment felt empty now that everything important was packed away. Jake had lived alone for the past 5 years since his wife died in a transport accident, and his work had become his entire life. Creating new worlds where humans could live and grow had given his life meaning after losing the person he loved most. His communication device chimed with an incoming message from General Murphy. The Aurora was ready for departure, and the crew was assembling for final briefings before launch. Jake picked up his cases and took one last look around the apartment before heading to the spaceport. The Aurora was larger than Jake had expected and gleamed with fresh paint in the orbital dock lights. Dr. Martinez was already aboard running diagnostics on the biological analysis equipment, while Captain Cooper supervised the loading of defensive weapon systems. Jake walked up the boarding ramp and felt the familiar excitement that came before every new mission. Unknown to the human crew, their departure had been noted by Zephyrian intelligence operatives stationed throughout human space. "Hi, Commander." Vextar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet was already making plans to deal with what he saw as a human spy mission disguised as scientific research.